I love the ocean, so I went ahead and put it in my room, and over the course of 7 days, I made this a reality, with a thriving community of fish, coral, and other invertebrates. In this video, I'll be creating a home for a diverse cast of creatures. I'm gonna start that video. I started out by setting up this squishy foundation, and soon after I added on the tank. It was going to be a small tank for some small fish, so adding in the sand wasn't too hard. I was giving the sand a slope to make it a bit more interesting, and I added some large rocks. With the creation of my tank, I added in the first guy. This guy is a decorator crab. He decorates himself in algae to blend in. I threw in a little mice as shrimp for him, but he was too busy holding onto the rock, so he just pathetically waved towards it until it went his way. Yummy. I also got this little yellow guy. He's a yellow clown goby. He started out pretty shy. He would just hide behind rocks, and whenever I'd come up to the glass to see him, he would just swim out of my view. You'll see more of him later though. I also got this blue guy. He's a neon goby. He would briefly dart around the sand dunes, minding his own business. Next, I ended up installing this light. A lot of the corals I was going to be adding are photosynthetic, so I was going to need some sort of light. And by the time I finished installing it, this little guy found his own cave. Every now and then he'd come out, especially to inspect this new sea anemone I got. I started out by placing him on the sand in the back, but then he started just traveling around the tank. Because just like other corals, he too is photosynthetic. Just look at him basking. He's chilling. Overall, I was moderately satisfied with what I've got so far, and it was time to let this guy chill for another day. I got a starfish. He usually used most of his time walking around the tank, crawling on his little tube feet under his body. As for the anemone, even though sea anemones don't quite have complex emotions, he seemed a little lonely, so I got him a clownfish. I also slid in this coral. In the wild they look brown like this, but under the blue light it looks completely different. He takes on this yellow look. I also got this little guy. He's a frog spawn coral. He's similar to a sea anemone except he can't really move around. And I got one of my favorite corals ever, a red sea finger gorgonian. And I slid in this guy, a red sea finger gorgonian. Pretty much this phase was just me stocking up the tank with coral, trying to make it look nice. With all these corals, I added in a new guy, this little guy. He is called a sexy anemone shrimp. I had more than just one, but when I added them in, they all scattered throughout the tank. They're called sexy anemone shrimp because of this twerking motion they do with their body. And they also like to sit on top of anemones, so they're the perfect fit for this tank. Another guy who loves to sit on anemones is this guy. He's called a porcelain crab. Immediately after putting him in, he would just wave his claws around. Eventually he found his way down to the cave next to the sea anemone, which he would later on host. The special thing about them is that unlike other crabs, they're actually filter feeders. Once they find a sea anemone to host, they don't really leave it. They just sit on top of it and use these feathery-like mandibles to catch food that drifts by. The yellow guy started to come out a little more, enjoying the nice breeze. However, the yellow guy never really swam around much. He'd usually just sit on his favorite rock, expressing dominion over his territory. He'd also do this odd hovering motion, where he'd stay still in the water. Quite the interesting fish. I ended up getting this coral because it looked like a throne, and I usually do research on the fish that I purchase. And I learned that the yellow clown goby likes to sit on coral, so I gave him the seat on purpose. However, during the nighttime, his reign was usually taken over by a decorator crab. I'm not sure if he would kick him off the chair or he would usually just find it empty. The clownfish started to host a sea anemone finally. I had a lot of macroalgae growing in another tank of mine, so I started to slide some in. I was hoping that it would grow out and make the tank look better. And with that, I felt there wasn't really much else for me to add. I feel like most of the tank's potential comes from the macroalgae that will grow in. 7 days isn't a crazy amount of time. Overall, it was looking pretty clear. However, something wasn't quite right. I'll be honest, I'm not quite satisfied with what I've created. I call this art piece Dissatisfaction, to express how openly dissatisfied I am with my art. This is one of my earlier creations, and to be honest, not quite happy. The tank was okay at best. Definitely isn't museum quality, and definitely not something worth me being prideful for. As of the time as this video is posted, this tank has already been scrapped. All the fish and coral were relocated to different tanks that they could survive in. I'm still unsure as to what to make of it, but I'll reuse the same tank for a future video. I appreciate you coming to my TED Talk. If you want to see what I turn this tank into, check out my future videos. When it's up, I'll post it on the outro. But yeah, thanks.